And we're joined by Mr. Yehor Brailian, analyst at Detector Media. Welcome, sir, to TVP World.
Yes, good night. Thank you for the invitation.
Pleasure.
So let me start by asking you about, well, a similar and a different case at the same time, because we're talking about an NBA player, Brittany Griner, who has been jailed by Russian authorities in 2022 and released after 10 months. She was swapped for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. Now, do you think that Mr. Gershkovich will also be treated as a bargaining chip? Is Russia trying to perhaps exchange him for somebody else?
They are all Russian hostages, Russia wants to use American citizens in their negotiations with Washington, and Moscow only wants to negotiate with the US counterparts. And that's why, unfortunately, it's only the beginning of this witch hunting. And there are 15 American journalists who were arrested in Russia, and Evgeny Gershkovich traveled to Russia in March 2023. He was arrested in Yekaterinburg, and today the trial began, and it can continue for several months, and the next session of the trial is scheduled for the 13th of August. And it's a very bad tendency, because Russia, they don't want to they don't want to follow any rules, any norms, any laws. So they don't care about the international law, they don't care about human rights. That's why it's very hard to get these prisoners back to the United States of America, even in the situation when Pentagon and the State Department they denied this accusation of work of Evgeny Gershkovich for the U.S. state. He's an independent journalist, and Russia accused him of being a spy and trying to get classified information about defense industry near Yekaterinburg. It's near the Ural Mountains, where the lion's share of Russian defense industry is located.
Yes, I mean, of course, to a large extent, we're not surprised by anything that Russia does nowadays. As you say, international law has no meaning there. But surely the Americans who go there should be aware of the risk. I mean, is there anything the American government can do to prevent such travel? Because it leaves them in a very difficult position after American citizens are captured and charged with made-up charges. Is there any way that Americans can be prevented from going to Russia?
Americans and other Western nations, they prevented from travels of their citizens to Russia, and especially diplomats, officials, and most part of embassies are located in the Baltic states, for example, and we can say about it for sure regarding the US embassy, the UK embassy in Russia. So, and that's why it's only way how to prevent from further arrests of the US citizens. And there are no ways how to get these people out, because Russia is a prison, And there is only one way, only Russian defeat on the battlefield in Ukraine. It can lead to further circumstances of the defeat of Russian imperialism and Russian authoritarian state.
Right, the story of Mr. Gershkovich is tragic indeed, but I just wanted to look at the broader picture as well. Of course, we've established that freedom of speech is non-existent in Russia, but I wanted to ask about local journalists, what some of them are doing to counter Russian disinformation, to perhaps deliver quality information to the Russian public. How does it look like in the country?
There is no freedom of speech in Russia. However, there are some independent journalists who try to cover independently what is going on, especially in the regions. We can talk about different projects of Radio Free Europe, and these projects are particularly about such regions as Siberia or Northern Caucasus. And Russians, they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know the truth about war crimes in Ukraine, about war crimes done by Russian military in Africa, in the Middle East. So even having really access to YouTube and Russian Federation blocked main messengers such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So Telegram is the main source of the news for Russians, and Telegram is allegedly controlled by Russian security service FSB. So Russia imposed this digital slavery. So Russians can read news only what is allowed to the general public. So there are not so many independent media outlets. Some of them, some of journalists and media, they moved to the EU countries, such media as Medusa, Дождь, Новая Газета. However, there are not so many journalists who live in Russia until now and who can say what is the public opinion, what Russian people think about the war. And that's why we have this really horrible situation, and only the whole decolonization, like cognitive decolonization, revisiting Russian history, Russian culture, only this can lead to some changes among the Russians.
Right. Now, I mean, very often, the suppression of information and keeping it away from the population is a reflection of a level of insecurity in the government. They're concerned about what might happen if the population learns the truth. Is there insecurity in the Kremlin?
Yes, for sure. And that's why Russian propaganda is working along with other states such as the Chinese People Republic, Iran, North Korea. So they established networks all around the world, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Europe. So after facing these protests like Bolotnaya during Medvedev's presidency or other protests in Hong Kong in 2019, authoritarian states decided to work together And that's why we have this situation when the old formats which were very active during the Cold War, such as Radio Free Europe, BBC, all these public diplomacy tools, they are underfunded right now, so they are not working properly anymore, and therefore the US and the West, they must find new ways of engagement with people on the ground, because Russian propaganda, especially in the West, but also inside Russia, they want to share such a narrative as anti-establishment, politicians in Washington, in London, in Brussels, they are very corrupt. That's why populist politicians are becoming more popular, and we see it very clearly after the current Europarlament elections. And yeah, people in Russia, they can find an alternative information. They can read different global media outlets such as CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, but they don't want to do it. They don't trust media at all, and it's a part of this post-Soviet heritage when you see one reality, official reality, but also you see the other reality in the everyday life, and it's like the collective trauma for all people who were living in Soviet Union.
The situation is certainly very difficult. Yehor Brailian, thank you, sir, for being with us this evening.
Thank you very much.